All right, hello everybody. It's still the 5th of July, 2020. Uh, this will probably be the last video that I do for the day. Just trying out different setups and things like that. But I thought everybody might like to see, me do a little bit of work on the Cobb kiln. I don't know if many people actually are familiar with building with Cobb. And again, this may be a terrible experiment. It may ultimately turn out to not work so good at all. But so far, I've been building with it. Actually, the first time I ever saw somebody build with Cobb was on an episode of Grand Designs, which is a British television show about architecture and people building. And a guy they built there in England, whole houses out of Cobb. I was like, wow, that's some pretty amazing stuff. Again, you dig it out of the ground. It's basically just clay, sand, and straw mixed together. And again, the straw gives it a lot of tensile strength, almost like rebar in concrete. So it gives it a lot of strength when it's dried. It's very strong, almost like concrete. And again, you can pretty much dig this stuff out of the earth if you have a good clay and sand content in your soil already. But as I had mentioned before, I had kind of run out of straw, and I had, in searching other people who build in Cobb, some people have actually used dry grass. So I said, well, I had plenty of dry grass around. So I raked myself up a bag full of dry grass, and I figure, well, maybe I can finish off another course or so of this Cobb wall. I'm getting close to the end. I'm getting kind of tired of building out of this stuff, as much fun as it's been to do this. Again, it's a lot of mixing. I mix. Some people mix theirs, if you got room in a wheelbarrow maybe, or on the ground on a sheet that you can kind of keep the ends folded together from time to time to get the clump back together again. I've mainly been mixing mine in 5-gallon buckets, and again, there's probably a lot of better ways to do it. It's just I find it not to make too big of a mess. It's easy to wash out my buckets when I'm done, so I just figured, well, I'll just do it that. And really, honestly, maybe 3 buckets. I don't fill it all the way up. Maybe like at the end, 2/3 of the way up. By the time I mixed it all, I do about 3 of those, and that gives me another good layer. And that's about really all that it can withstand anyway. It needs to dry out. That's the thing about building in Cobb, is that you cannot do it all in one day like a bricklayer. You pretty much go up to the height that the Cobb can continue to hold its shape, and then you have to let it dry. And then once it's dry and it's firmed up, then it won't hopefully misshape when you put the next layer on. And so that's kind of how you build. Now, I got impatient. We had a lot of rain a week or two ago. I got impatient. I've watched a lot of videos. I don't know if you all have seen, I think it's called Primitive Technology on YouTube, and the guy in the woods. Very neat to watch. Him build many things out of things found in the woods, Again, using a lot of technology that many people don't use, but it's very useful things that you can do with it. And so I've seen him make a lot of kilns and things like that out of termite clay and things like that. And I also noticed many times he would start to make his kiln. Now, a lot of his were pit kilns that were dug out of the earth, and then he would actually build his kiln into the earth. And I would notice a lot of times he would actually use fire as he was going. And in doing so, he was able to speed up the drying process. The downside of that is when you don't allow clay type articles to dry at their own pace, a lot of times when you force the issue, you can tend to get thermal differences, stresses that are created that can cause cracking. And actually, I did start to, I believe, experience that. So I did the dark areas that you may see in the walls or may have seen in other videos are because of the fire that I set in there to try to speed up the drying out of my walls. And it did dry my walls out. It seemed to do okay the first time I did it, but I noticed after the second time, when I did the next layer up, I noticed in that back left corner, I noticed some cracking. Now I filled it in with more clay. Hopefully I was able to repair it, and maybe, especially because the next course up hopefully won't crack, hopefully that crack is contained and it won't cause me any problems, but again, it might. I've not done this before. So anyway, we'll get going here. I'm going to mix up some cob and do my next layer up, which either may be my last layer or my second to the last layer before I start lining it with refractory brick and stuff on the inside. So I have found it best. At first I actually ran out of sand. I was using sand in the lower layers. I'm trying to see if I can get away without doing that in the upper layers, which again may bite me. Maybe I should just go buy some sand, but again, there's a fair amount of sand already in the clay soil here, so I'm hoping it's enough. I found it best to mix my clay into a very concrete consistency, very wet consistency, and then mix my straw or my grass in afterwards. If you try to do straw and grass into dry clay, there's so much resistance, it just doesn't work. So when I found that I've made a very wet, gloppy consistency out of the clay and then push the straw into that, I find that it mixes much better. So I'm gonna go ahead and load up some clay. I just went and dug some more because I was running low on clay. So I try to break up as many of the clumps. I don't know if you can hear me. I try to break up as many of these clumps as I can because it's just more that needs to break down. I get any big sticks out that might poke me or not do so good for the cob. But again, I'm not trying to get every little bit out, which is nice. And again, a lot of this stuff will break down once the water is added, which is also nice. I said I usually put maybe like 2/3 of a bucket worth of clay in here before I add the water. And then there's a lot of air in between these clay particles right now. But I find that once I put the water in there and start mixing it, it all sinks down pretty good. In fact, I would imagine that it'll go down to a half or maybe less than a half of a 5-gallon bucket. Alright, I think that's probably enough. Like I said, usually it takes about 2 of these buckets that I mix up before I can get all the way around. So I'm not gonna turn the camera around, but I've got a hose right over there. I'm just gonna add some water and I'll come back here and mix it. Okay, I might end up needing a little bit more, but if I do, that's fine. But I'm gonna go ahead and start, and I'm mixing this water in. And again, I want it to be a pretty gloppy mixture. I don't want to have to work it too much, put my hands through it. I said in the end, it really wants to be the texture of kind of a concrete, just real workable and squishy like that. And then get that straw or grass mixed into it. I don't know if I can show this to you or not. It's kind of heavy. But it's I can work it very easily with my hands. So when I push that straw or that grass into it, I can just work my fingers into it and really mix it very easily well. So this grass is obviously a lot finer. And I also find that I don't like to push it, even though I just put a lot in there, I try to spread it out. It's better to mix it, not one big wad at a time, but to really kind of, now this stuff seems like it's a lot easier to work with because it's so much finer, but obviously I probably will have to put more in to get it to do what I want it to do. But definitely straw, when I would put it in a very big wad, it did not work in very easily at all. And then oftentimes I would find when I'd take that chunk out and I'd start working it, there'd be a big dry wad in there, and then I'd have to kind of mix it all up again, which wasn't good. So, you know, better to take your straw like this and kind of put a little bit in, mix it, put a little bit more in, mix it a little at a time, and let that moisture really get in and around all the fibers that you're putting into this. But this is definitely getting very fibrous now, which I like. And you can actually see it, like as I pull it, you can actually see all the fibers mixed into that, and that stuff is great when it packs in. And you can still mold and sculpt this, which it's one of the things that I find so beautiful about working with cob, almost like with pottery or anything else. It's, or you know, they call this, they use adobe down in like the Southwest. It's so sculptural. You know, again, you can mold what you build to a very pleasing form. You're not everything has to be square. Again, instead of just doing a square kiln with a very straight angular thing, I'm thinking about making more of an arc in the front here. And maybe even the chimney, instead of just coming up and being a very straight chimney, which is fine, but it's a little boring, is I thought, well, what if I brought it up and actually kind of flared it at the top? Now, again, the actual chimney inside, the functional part, can be straight, but that flare from the chimney might be real pretty. And again, that's something that working with cob allows you to really kind of express your preference for aesthetics in what you're building. So anyway, and again, I don't know if you can see it, but it's very fibrous now. So maybe I'll start maybe in the back corner. Hopefully I'll still be in the shot here. All right, I don't know if you can hear me still, but basically you just take your wad and press it where you want your clump, and you roughly form it to what you want, get it to roughly the shape you want. I like to go high because, again, I don't want to do as many courses. I don't want to do a million of these courses. I want to do it kind of in one or two more layers. So I probably want and my cob can really withstand support its own weight to about that height. So I'm thinking that that's probably a good height to make it. And again, you kind of, as you're going, you kind of smooth it down and you kind of shape it how you want. You want it to really smooth into what's already there so that you don't really see the seams. You know, one of the things to be careful of is, again, you know, you're always thinking about, what am I putting inside this? I'm putting brick inside this. So if I get sloppy with my cob and I start to come in, well, that's going to interfere with my bricklaying inside. So I haven't sat there with a level the whole time, but a few times I put a level on this to make sure that the walls are pretty, at least pretty true. I've given myself a little bit of a gap or a little bit of an expansion that I can put like refractory mortar behind it. So I didn't try to go exact. But so you definitely want to make sure, like in this back corner, that I'm not allowing that cob to really fall over the side, because it's going to be difficult when it comes to building the inside structure. But you can see that this cob is really sticking itself together now, so it makes it really easy to work with. And you just, like I said, just keep squishing it. Kind of like to, maybe we'll zoom in a little bit here because the mixing part of this is done for right now. And I know you'd probably rather see this a little more close up. All right, so this is the section, oops, this tripod. Okay, so this is the section that I'm working on. So this is the section that I'm working on. And again, you know, you're kind of massaging the pieces together that you put. And again, you're trying to kind of flare it down into the piece below. So you do a lot of squishing it back and forth, but again, that's helping that all the pieces of grass to interlock with each other. And again, you really want it to interlock with your layer below, because the layer below is quite a bit drier than this is. So it's not like the fibers from the layer below can join with this, because they're already pretty hard. So you really want to push it on there good, so that when it dries, it's really stuck to the layer below. I would say maybe my cob is a little on the dry side. I mean, I am able to work it, which is good, but it's not as smooth. But I'm gonna wet this cob just a little bit more. It's not really, I really want it to be able to smooth it into each other with that clay. Again, all it really has to do is be strong enough to hold its own weight until it dries. And I think it's more than strong enough to do that. But I like to really be able to kind of finish and smooth that surface and blend the two together and not have a lot of seams. So that will add to the strength of it. You can see it's pretty wobbly, which is fine. Like I said, once it dries, it's like concrete, man. It's not really going anywhere. So that is pretty much the process, you know. And I said I sit there a lot and kind of look at it from different angles and can tell if it's seeming like it's leaning in. I might even get the level out a little bit and adjust it a little bit here and there. But I'll build this out up to this height. I'll do some courses over there and some back here. Like I said, I probably won't sit here and have you guys with me this whole course. I might bring you back in at the very end. But, you know, I said no sense in watching the same thing over and over again. But you can see I kind of put it up, the lump on there, squish it together, squish it into, you know, the pre-existing piece or the bottom, and then just use my hands, and I'm constantly just squeezing it. And the funny thing is as you run your hands up and down the wall, you feel the width of the wall and you feel how it's going. So you just kind of keep that same pressure, and it's amazing, you know, how pretty much straight you can continue to make your wall. And then every once in a while you'll see that it's sagging a little bit and you got to push it in a little bit more. But like, that's a pretty nice finish. You can't even really see where the last layer was and the next one begins, and that's really what you want, is you want it to look like it's all one piece when you're done. So okay, so welcome back, everybody. See if I can show you what we've been doing here. Okay, don't go anywhere, camera. Okay, so I've got the second layer done, all the way up to the last little bit, which is right here. So you can see here was where the previous level was, and now it's up to that high. So I've got my last little bit of cob mixed. I spared you guys all that monotony. I might have more than enough, but I might end up going a little bit more. So there's our cob. As long as it can really support its own weight and keep its shape, is really kind of what you're looking at. So, wow, when I first started doing this, I was working on my ground at knee level. And now I'm actually having to stand up inside of it to work the top. So that's kind of cool to see how far it's come in a couple weeks' time. So again, I'm just kind of judging by eye and feeling the level below as to how much, if it's overly thick or not. And again, as you kind of move in different angles, sometimes you see a different little bulge that needs fixing. Now you see right here is what I was talking about. When you don't mix it well, you'll get clumps, or if you put too much in at one time, you get these clumps of grass, which is not what you want. So gotta pull that out kind of, and maybe remix it just a bit, which is fine. Seems like maybe I grabbed just enough grass for this course. I was thinking maybe that would be enough to finish the whole thing, which, again, I don't know. I gotta measure this. I don't know how much higher it will go. This may be the last course, or maybe one more. Again, the bricks that I'm putting in here are 4.5 inches tall, or at least the way that I'll be placing them, they're 4.5 inches tall. So that I basically have to calculate, you know, what an even number of bricks will get me. And again, because again, you know, here's how long my arm is. I can't throw anything much larger than that. I mean, some people I've heard that want to throw big vases or things like that will actually throw sections of it at a time. Okay, well, I'm a novice potter, so that's not happening anytime soon. And again, I'm just getting started with all this stuff. But yeah, as I said, I have way too much. So we'll take some of this off. Looks like I'm a little low here anyway. But so yeah, so hopefully maybe this is the last course around that I have to do, which would be awesome. I would be very happy, because I'm ready to you know, as with all projects, you get excited when you start them, and you get even more excited when you're about to finish them, and you kind of move on to doing other things. So this was fun. This was something I've always kind of, or at least for a while now, have been thinking about trying to do. I don't know if I'm still in the frame here. I have to adjust the camera just a little bit. You know, something that I have had a hankering to do. Definitely glad that I was able to do it, but I'm ready to actually start throwing pots and finishing pots and enjoying what I've made, or selling them to other people to enjoy. So, like I said, I'm glad this cob phase is, well, again, it's not to completion, because again, from here on up, here, let me raise the camera just a bit. Sorry. Again, from here on up, we still gotta make, you know, if this is the curve here, still gotta make the roof and the chimney. So we'll see how that all comes out, see if it's as neat of an idea as it is in my head. Hoping it will be. But again, so yeah, I'm just trying to smooth out this level just in case this may be my last one. Maybe I don't have to build anymore. So I definitely want something that's relatively the same height all the way around. I can always just add a little bit here, a little bit there. Like I said, you could see that the cob is holding its shape pretty good, even though it's wobbly, but as long as she's not falling or collapsing under her own weight, that's a good thing. So there we go. That's semi-even. Looks like you're in a low spot there in the back. There's not much grass or straw in this, but it's all right. Again, as far as any ratios, I don't have an exact science or an exact ratio. I'm kind of doing it by what feels like the right stiffness of something that will hold its shape and dry, strong. I'm pretty happy with how the cobbing process has been for me. I got a little discouraged, so I laid this whole foundation for this last summer, and it was toward fall, and I really kind of ran out of motivation, and it got cold, and you really can't do this in the winter time because the days are so short that the cob won't dry out. You don't get high enough temperatures for the cob to dry and get strong. So it was just the foundation, it was just the base, and then I had a rainstorm come by and I hadn't covered it, and that that rain will erode until this is protected. That rain will just wreak havoc on your cob. So that's why it's important to keep it covered whenever there's bad weather coming in, to dry it out as much as possible, keep it dry as much as possible. Again, just trying to keep these walls somewhat even. And then again, before I knock this stop, I will also take a measurement and make sure that I'm still at least 21 to 21.5 inches, hopefully, apart. Again, what that does is that gives me my 18 inches of width for my base, and my walls will be built on either side of that coming up. And they're 1.5 inch brick, so there's 2 walls, that's another 3 inches, so 18 plus 3, 21. And then I try to give myself maybe 1/4 to 1/2 inch of play that, again, I could always mix up. I'm thinking maybe like a high refractory cement with perlite mixed into it, because perlite is good for insulation. Mix that in behind and put it behind there, because again, I really didn't think this through. Again, I'm a novice, and I was looking at, I think I said Menards, but it's actually Home Depot that has this fire brick that will withstand 2,700 degrees, and I was like, well, that's great, and it's hard brick. Well, what I didn't realize until reading other people's information later is that hard brick absorbs more heat. It's not as insulatory. It doesn't insulate as well. So the problem with that is that more heat will get through that brick and into the cob. And again, there's a lot of straw in the cob, so you don't want the cob getting super hot to where, let's say, the straw actually begins to be burned up and break down, because that's a lot of your strength in your cob walls. So those are some of my concerns, that maybe I should have thought about getting a thinner brick. Now they do, I guess, make soft fire brick, which is more insulating, that perhaps I could get at 1.5 inches. Again, 1.5 inches is not very thick though, so I really maybe should have thought about this more. I could put thicker brick in here, which would just mean that my chamber would be smaller, narrower. I don't know how happy I would be about that. So those are things that I'll have to consider before I actually move ahead with that part of it. But I'm getting pretty close to that now, where I need to really make some decisions. If I had to, because I try to make my holes that are down there for my, you can't really see it from there. My holes that are down here, I tried to make to where they actually are 1.5 inches from the ground and from the walls, so that my brick would sit around that. If I went with a thicker brick and it stuck out more, I would probably have to start chipping away more of that back wall, which I don't know how easy it will be, but we'll find out, I guess, if I was to have to move my burners in more. And then I would probably then have to make my chimney deeper, because the narrower the chimney is, again, I'm trying to get a certain kind of square inches of space for the chimney to suck air through. So I might have to actually then bring the chimney in, which again will also make my chamber smaller. But these are all things that, again, you really should think about when you're laying out your kiln. I was watching a guy on YouTube think they're called Washington Street Pottery. Very knowledgeable gentleman. Gives many lectures about gas kilns, electric kilns. The man is an encyclopedia of knowledge on pottery and ceramics and firing. So that was very technical information. So really enjoyed listening to him. And when he was talking about building kilns, he said, you know, really, you should build your kiln, design it from the inside out. Think about how much space you need, and then decide all of the other things later. I wasn't thinking about any of these things when I laid the foundation for this. Now, I just thought, well, this is a pretty good size, roughly. I had no idea how thick my walls were going to be or anything like that. Again, kind of just winging it. But I'm pretty happy with the results so far. I think hopefully the heat will not fracture my walls. They seem very strong. So I'm hoping that they will be okay. And again, maybe it won't be the most efficient fired kiln, and maybe I'll learn something from it that I'll have to do different next time. But we'll see. We'll have to see at the time. But yeah, I don't know if I can attach pictures or things like that, but at some point here, maybe I will even do a video of just different pictures that I have of the different stages of this. I think I probably took some pictures maybe as I was laying the foundation, not many. I wasn't really thinking about documenting it that much, I don't think. So, but I will, if I do have them, maybe I'll make a video showing some of the different stages of laying the foundation and all that, if somebody just maybe gives them an idea of something they want to copy. Again, like my stones at the base here, these square stones, there's 2 layers of them. I just wanted to basically keep the cob out of the water if it rained. I did not want the water hitting and splashing up onto the cob. So I went 2 layers of that. There's river rock under here, especially in the center, because basically these square stones are they're not laid with mortar or anything like that. They're just dry laid. They're just dry, you know, stacked on each other. And I went around the border 2 layers high, and then I filled the center with river rock to give it some support. And then I went ahead and started laying cob on top of that. So yeah, it's come out pretty good for, again, being a first attempt at doing something like this. Looks like there's some piece of grass growing out of my wall still. It's still clay. But yeah, so it's going good. And like I said, I'll measure this and see if I need to go any higher, but maybe I'm done. Maybe I can start actually lining this thing with brick. And then what I tend to do in the end is that, so I think my actual fire brick will end about here. So I probably will build up cob here like a rim to be even with the floor. And then what I will like to do then is to take fire bricks of some sort, and then they'll be stacked in the entryway here. I said it turned out good. I said I hope maybe this gives anybody who wants to do something like that some ideas. Nothing's guaranteed, so there's no guarantees with what you see on YouTube. It's just people being creative and sharing what they do know and what they have ideas of trying. So, but thanks for watching, and again, never be afraid to get your hands dirty. Talk to you later.